yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. Most of you know that. 5 teams, 7 years. Thank goodness, enabled me to get some of these gigs calling games. I'll be able to call Air Force at Army on Saturday for CBS. Really looking forward to that. Yesterday, I was in the booth for the Browns and the Ravens. Just a wild, awesome game. Thoroughly enjoyed that. You can always check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. Love those of you that check us out on social at Ross Tucker Pod. And for those of you that listen or watch, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL, the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, you know that if you take advantage of any of our sponsors and then email me, ross@rosstucker.com, or if you just engage with at Ross Tucker Pod on social media, you have a great opportunity to win a little something from me. The star of the show, it is Emory Hunt. He calls games too. Does a terrific job. Had Monmouth and Towson over the weekend. Need to check him out on social media at F-Ball Game Plan, Football Game Plan on YouTube. And it is never too early. Just get out of the way. Just that way you know you take care of it. Footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. Nobody, and I mean nobody, evaluates as many players as Emory. So he has the breadth and the width and the depth and all the other words I can think of with at the end, all around. He is fantastic. All right. Speaking of fantastic, Emory, last week, not so fantastic with the bets, unfortunately. We had one of those weeks. It happens, which, by the way, 2 things I always think about. Number one, well, first of all, I had an awesome week for even money betting NFL. But when someone has a bad week, number one, it makes me appreciate the good weeks, like last week, even more. And then number 2, it means it's probably a good week to get on board because you're probably due for a bounce back. You had Syracuse plus the 5.5. Man, it is rare, Emory, when a game is that ugly, I start feeling bad for a young man. I was feeling bad for Kyle McCord. It's a showcase game. It's the only game on, and it got ugly early for him. Emory had Syracuse plus the 5.5. I thought it was a good bet. I was backing Emory on that. They lost to Pitt 41-13 after all those picks. Then UNLV, you had them plus 3 against Boise State. UNLV, good team, getting points at home. I was with you on that one too, Emory, and they were winning until that game-winning drive by Boise State late.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch both of those games and how they played out. I thought the biggest turning point in that UNLV game was the interception before halftime. That changed the complexity of it because it gave Boise that score that kind of gave them the necessary distance to kind of force it to go back and forth where they have to keep pace and catch up, and they weren't able to do that over the course of the rest of the game. In Syracuse, I thought it wasn't the pick sixes that I felt bad for McCord, the multiple pick sixes. It was when he sacked himself. I was like, yeah, it's not your night, son. You know what I'm saying? Just pack it up and get ready for next week. Bad loss for Syracuse.
That was not a particularly athletic-looking play for Kyle McCord. The next one, I got to tell you, Emory, I mean, I was not with you on SMU laying the 11 points. Anybody that listens or watches the Even Money Betting Podcast knows I don't like laying points that much, and certainly not double digits. But I even liked LSU plus the 3, and I think they were winning by double digits. And then all of a sudden, A&M puts in this other quarterback, and it was over. I mean, it was crazy how quickly that changed after Texas A&M put Reed in at quarterback.
What's fascinating about that whole game is I know it was a lot of different things that you could attack. Everyone loves to say momentum doesn't exist, but you clearly saw a different A&M team when he got in the game and the run game picked up and the defense saw the physicality of how the offense was running the football against LSU. They ran their way back into the ball game, and the defense kind of responded like, man, they're taking it to their defense. We're going to take it to their offense. So you saw momentum in play. Then you also saw you found yourself asking the question, why wasn't he the starter? Because the kid just came in a hostile situation where they're down, they're not playing really particularly well, and he didn't have any care in the world. Like, he was just going to execute my red zone plays, and that's what I'm gonna do. And they kept him out there, and you're like, why wasn't he the starter from Jump Street? And then the third part is, how can we expand the passing game? Because he only threw 2 passes, which tells you more that they really ran their way to come back into victory, and, alongside the defense doing what they need to do to get the ball back from LSU. So I will be interested to see how they expand his role, if he's going to be the starter next weekend, and how they're able to build on what he did. Because again, right now it's just, QB run, QB power, zone read with a timely shot deep down the field. They have to throw more than 2 passes with him in the ball game, so it doesn't become a package, and instead it becomes an offense.
Going to be hard to bench the number 1 pick in the draft, according to some people, and Connor Wigman. I think we'll get to that a little bit later. I think A&M South Carolina is actually one of our games for this week. And then lastly, you laid the point with SMU. They won the game, but kind of like I thought it would be. It was a close game. SMU won 28-27. Manny Diaz is just a heck of a coach, and although SMU still put up 28 points, they were able to hang. So you were 0 for 4 for the week. So you went to 17-24 for the year. For those of you that are new listeners or new viewers, I promise this is the worst year Emory's had out of the 3 or 4 we've been doing this. So far, betting against the spread, but there's a lot of football left to be played, including Ohio State and Penn State. As a reminder, all of Emory's picks are presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. I would love to be watching that Ohio State-Penn State game, Emory. I'd love to be drinking some Labatt Blue Lights with all my friends that are going to be there, living life to the power of we. Always enjoying it responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. But I will be doing the Air Force Army game at the exact same time. This is fascinating, Emory, because Ohio State's quarterback, Will Howard, has already come out and said, yeah, I grew up a diehard Penn State fan my whole life. Penn State didn't want me. I wasn't good enough. We'll see about Saturday. Had to go to Kansas State, transfers to Ohio State. Now he gets to play at Penn State. Meanwhile, for Penn State, I don't know if Drew Aller is going to be able to play. He tweaked his knee Saturday night against Wisconsin. So Bo Prabula, local kid, you might have done one of his games in high school, Emory. Bo Prabula, a local kid, he came in second half against Wisconsin and looked good. So there's a lot of quarterback intrigue in this one. But both teams, Emory, have like legit pairs of running backs. Ohio State has Travion Henderson, who they already had, and then Quinshon Judkins transferred in from Ole Miss. Meanwhile, Penn State, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton came in the same year. So curious to get your thoughts on these running backs and what jumps out to you about them.
Well, from a scouting perspective, this shows your true chops as a scout. Not because all 4 guys are talented, but because it forces you to kind of see what they do in a limited sample size and project forward on how they can help your football team moving forward. And I remember, and I always love to draw back to this, situation, because it shows you why you should lock into, with us on this show, but also shows you my scouting chops as well. I was at Boston College, Kansas a few years ago when the starter and the headliner was Puka Williams. But as I'm watching the game, this guy keeps coming in and getting, small amounts of carries, but he also had a big day against a very solid Boston College defense, and it was Khalil Herbert. And I put in my notes like, hey, this could be my secret sleeper in terms of a guy that could be a starter at the pro level, although he's a backup. And I think this is the situation where, and again, he leaves Kansas, goes and transfers to be the guy at Virginia Tech, ends up having a great year, gets drafted, was a starter for the Bears. So it worked out perfectly and proved me to be right. But at the end of the day, these games, like one guy may be the leadoff guy, but the other guy may end up being a better pro, or both guys could end up being better pros. Now, Puka Williams is having a solid career in the UFL with the DC Defenders and returning kicks. I think last year was also with the San Antonio Brahmas. But now you look at Ohio State. Junkins was the one that came in from Ole Miss. Fantastic player, can catch the ball out of the backfield, has probably a little bit more straight line speed than Henderson. So you can look at him and say, okay, well, he can be our bursty guy, our guy that can hit the home run. But I think what will enhance Henderson's role is that Henderson also returns kicks. We've seen him do that. He also, I feel like, does a fantastic job in pass pro. And we both know that's going to get you on the field as a rookie. So his blitz pickup is tremendous, just from a recognition standpoint to then getting there and blocking the right guy. So he's able to see it across the line of scrimmage, then go and attack the right guy. On Penn State's side, Allen is a more physical runner. He has a little bit more power, I believe. You could do a little bit more in terms of, the type of scheme he could fit in. But Singleton, I feel like, has a little bit more wiggle, a little bit more shiftiness, a little bit more of situational explosiveness. Like, hey, I need to be fast here. Okay, I could be patient here. So both guys give you a little bit of everything, and all four will make this a scout's dream to go out and evaluate, how they affect this game. And the reason why we focus on the four backs, Ross, is because you remove both quarterbacks out of the equation, right? And because both defenses are really doggone good, so they can find a way to kind of make the quarterbacks ineffective, whoever starts for Penn State, and they could kind of get Will Howard in the funk. So the run game will be very important in who can find success. And there's four good backs to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Singleton has some serious juice. Like, Singleton can take it 80 yards. That's not really Katron Allen's game. The other thing that's interesting about this game, Penn State, they didn't just lose Aller Saturday night. Their right tackle, Anthony Donko, went down. They lost their other edge guy, denied Dennis Sutton, who's opposite Abdul Carter. They lost several guys that are important when you're going against Ohio State. Ohio State, Emory, 4-point road favorites, which I'm curious how much that has to do with Aller being banged up or not. But obviously, Penn State has not beaten Ohio State in a long time. Ohio State, 4-point road favorites. What are you doing here?
I can lay these points with Ohio State. What makes the Aller injury tough is because he's athletic too. And if he can't move and evade within the pocket like we've seen him do throughout the season, it makes it tough for him to be the Drew Aller that he needs to be in order to beat Ohio State. And I feel like that's going to be the difference between Ohio State going into Happy Valley and getting a win and them losing that ball game. But I will say this, if James Franklin can win this ball game, it would come via, the strength of coaching, game planning, trick plays. Like, I would expect Penn State to open up the entire playbook in terms of whatever we're going to use it. Don't save it. This is a one-game season. So we should expect a fantastic game. I just can't trust Penn State without a healthy quarterback against this team.
By the way, I'll just say this because I watch a lot of Penn State football. Drew Aller is the best quarterback Penn State's had in a while. And they had Clifford, who had a great career, and Trace McSorley, who had a great career. I mean, I'm telling you, Drew Aller, he is impressive with the throws that he makes, and he's more mobile than you think. It's a shame that he's either not going to play or won't be 100%. So, all right, Emory's laying the 4 with Ohio State. I would take Penn State and the point. I think Ohio State probably wins the game, especially with these guys beat up. But I do think at Penn State that they'll be able to keep it close and it'll be a one-score game, field goal game. So I prefer Penn State with the points. What about Texas Tech is at Iowa State, Emory? And I feel like people are not realizing that Iowa State is undefeated and Iowa State is really good and the favorites in the Big 12 along with BYU. I mean, it's unbelievable what these two schools have done. Texas Tech is getting 14 and a half. So 2 touchdowns and the hook at Iowa State. Why don't we start with the guys you're going to be checking out in this game?
Running back Taj Brooks was someone we spent a lot of time on last year, and then he decided to go back to Texas Tech, which is good because, again, he's one of the more underrated backs in college football. He's about 5'10", 230, built like Bam Morris was. Back when, Coach Dykes used to run the heck out of the football at Texas Tech, and they were just churning out tailbacks at the next level. But he's got some burst. He can catch the ball. He's a difference maker, and he helps keep this offense balanced in terms of what they want to do and how they love to wing it around the field, but they can run the heck out of the football. And Jalen Noel, the receiver for Iowa State, I'm a big fan of because, again, I like receivers that are built like running backs because it kind of gives you, an idea into the offensive coordinator part of your brain to where, man, we can utilize him in the wide receiver run game. We don't have to get him deep down the field, although he can. We can throw a short pass and he can break a couple of tackles. Very Golden Tate-like in that regard, where he can, break some tackles, physical his way past a defender and get a first down or create a chunk play. And I think how both guys play, they're two like game breakers. So like if you were broadcasting this game, these would be the impact players that you talk about in the open, because that's how impactful they are to their offense. And so, when you're watching these games from a scouting perspective, you're looking at the key players, but you're also looking at how they play in the biggest of games. Because to your point, this is a huge game because I've said this on, CBS Sports HQ, where I am frustrated that the conversation has been once again forced to make excuses for a 3-loss SEC team when you have an Iowa State in a Power 4 conference that's undefeated. BYU's undefeated. You got SMU sitting right there nipping at the heels of an undefeated Pitt. Miami, Clemson only has 1 loss, but yet we're trying to, put Georgia ahead of an undefeated Penn State, of an undefeated Miami, and, you ignoring these Power 4 teams that are playing really good football like Iowa State and BYU. To be honest, the Big 12.
Love it. Texas Tech getting 14 and a half, Emory, on the road. What do you think?
This Texas Tech still has, some fight in them in terms of, hey, we could be spoiler. I can't take them plus 14 and a half against, I can't take Iowa State laying these 14 and a half, although Iowa State is good, but they've been a little bit Kid Icarus, flying too close to the sun. So this game will be a lot closer because of the significance and how good Tech is. So I'm going to take them plus the points.
All right. Emory's got Texas Tech plus 14 and a half. That's a new one. A little bit Kid Icarus. Was there a video game?
Yes, Nintendo. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. That just, I have not heard Kid Icarus in like 35 years. That is amazing. All right. What about, once a week, Emory likes to have a smaller school game. Let's talk a little Yale at Columbia. There's a couple receivers in this game that caught your eye, Emory. I don't even know where to find a point spread on it. So Yale at Columbia, the receivers.
Yeah, well, yeah, because the FCS point spreads don't come out until Friday, so be on the lookout for that. But what I love about this, I don't know if you saw the game Friday night, Ross, but David Pantelis, the receiver for Yale, made the catch of the year.
I saw you post that.
Yes,
but then I never saw the catch. He's a Western PA kid. He's an Upper St. Clair kid. So I remember him from high school, but I didn't get a chance to actually see the catch.
well, you've seen it already because it looked exactly like the Antonio Freeman versus the Vikings catch where he was laying on the ground and the ball the ball hit the Penn defender first in the back of the helmet. Pantelis fell on the ground and his leg that kicked up when he fell on the ground kicked the ball back into his chest and he caught the ball. Like, it was crazy. It was insane concentration. And he went on to have a fantastic game the rest of the way. Like, that kind of jump-started Yale's offense because he was making these contested catches, these physical catches. Then you go and look at, he's 6'2", 210. I'm like, and he's a senior. I was like, okay, now he's on my radar. And when you look at the receiver for Columbia, Bryson Canty, he's already been on the radar. He has some good athleticism. He could fly, he could jump, all of those things you want to see a receiver. And he's on the Shrine Bowl 1,000 watch list as well. So 2 excellent receivers. This is going to be a very good game, man, because Columbia is they can run the ball with Joe Giorgi. And also Yale has been solid this season in terms of how Tony Reno and company works that defensive line, that offensive line. They get a lot done on both sides of the ball. That's gonna be a fun game to watch.
All right, so we talked about A&M a little bit earlier. They take on South Carolina. Obviously a huge game. A&M is laying 3.5 points on the road against South Carolina, Emory.
This is a big game, and you have the unknown of the quarterback position in terms of we don't know how he can do for a full game in terms of we've seen him start games and we've seen him play before, obviously, but this is probably the best defense in the SEC in South Carolina, or at least the best defensive line. So that's going to be the big challenge. However, South Carolina loves to play these games. I will take South Carolina the points here. I think we get a 1-point game or a 2-point game or 3. And that way you avoid the hook. So I will take South Carolina the points, but keep an eye on both of those A&M D linemen because they are outstanding.
So I'm with Emory. I like the points in South Carolina. A&M, after a huge Saturday night win against a rival, now they got to go on the road. South Carolina's tough. South Carolina played Alabama tough in Tuscaloosa. Now you got to go to Columbia. With those guys, if South Carolina had better quarterback play,
right,
they would be really good. There's a lot of good D linemen in this one, Emory. I mean, that Scorton guy for A&M, I was watching them Saturday night. Both these teams have, and that's probably the biggest difference typically between the SEC and some of the other conferences. Although like a Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, they'll have guys like this too. Just monster D linemen. Like, that's the biggest thing that jumps out to me. And like there's more depth of monster D linemen in the SEC than there is in the other conferences, where it feels like only like the Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan will have guys that look like, okay, that guy looks like a first or second round NFL pick D lineman.
Look at how we talk about Georgia's offensive linemen, how they just look different. And to your point, which is perfect, that's how we look at A&M's D-line and South Carolina's D-line. They just look different than the average FBS defensive lineman.
No, they really do. It's impressive. Anything like, what do you think? Like, anything else in your mind about quarterbacks and handling pressure in these situations?
That's the biggest, thing you're supposed to look for in terms of scouting, Ross, because I tweeted it out. It's not about just the pressure of the defense and the blitz. That's obvious. It's the pressure of the situation. How you protect the lead, how you come back from a deficit, backed up offense, third down offense, red zone offense. Can you close out a ball game, end of game situations? How you handle pressure matters more than anything else that you do as a quarterback. I don't care about the height. I don't care about how fast you run. I don't care about how far or hard you could throw. How can you handle pressure? Because we see it every Sunday, Ross. It is always about pressure. Think about the mental toughness that's necessary to do what America's quarterback Jameis Winston did in the game you called. The play before, he threw an interception that was dropped. Then the next play throws the game with it in the situation where, hey, we just need a field goal. Nah, I'm going deep down the field. I see the post open. It's a touchdown. That's how locked in you have to be. And a lot of quarterbacks crumble in those situations.
It was that was wild because you're right. They were already in field goal range, but Jameis knew that was the right throw to make. He's got some Flacco in him, where he's gonna chuck it. Check him out on social at FBall Game Plan. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. The keg is kicked. We are all tapped out.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.